you know, like the VI is put together and how inheritance works and how you override files and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So have you got sort of stuck in yet? Have you sort of managed to do any designs so far, or have you you know, not got that far yet?
Yeah, no, I've done designs and but they haven't been implemented on the actual, you know, like just a Photoshop document or a PNG fireworks.
Okay, cool. Okay.
And I was just playing with some of the CSS before, just on a local server. So yeah, I've done a little bit, just learning about Bootstrap and the different classes and whatnot.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me know if I'm going over stuff that's too basic, like you already know. It's hard to gauge where to start, but I'll just go. I mean, this document's fairly handy, so I'll just run through this quickly. So yeah, like basically with every new client, obviously, like the great thing about Claromentis is you can give them a sort of extra level of customization. We can add kind of a visual interface on top of our core product, which makes it kind of completely consistent and suited to them. And there's a couple of things we sort of try and do when we're doing that, just because obviously, you know, as far as the customer's concerned, they're kind of getting this new custom thing, but obviously actually the majority of it is pre-built. So there are certain things that we have to try and, if we can, just kind of hold on to within the interface and kind of build on top of that.
Yeah.
So I won't go through like all of this in great detail, but you know, so obviously underneath everything you've got the default VI. That's kind of like the stock interface. That's what you get out of the box, and it's fairly plain. And I don't think we ever actually would give a system away with just a default VI. For no other reason than it just doesn't. It's kind of very generic, and it doesn't suit anyone perfectly. It's kind of a very basic approach. And I'll send this document over after. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but essentially there are a few key components that we try and sort of keep. So we've got this black info bar along the top, this black bar along the top, which is what we call info bar. That's got some sort of fairly fundamental and standard UI features in there. So we've got kind of like notifications and links to kind of user settings, global search and that sort of thing. And you'll see in a lot of the designs, especially the recent ones for the past sort of year or so, they'll all have that black bar across the top.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not to say we can't move it around or change it. Like, I guess the difficulty is you're always trying to sort of kind of get that balance between giving the customer something really nice and custom and that's theirs and it's what they want, but also trying to hold on to, well, also trying to make your life a bit easier as well, and making sure you're not, you know, drastically changing what's already been built, because you'll just end up, you know, taking way longer than you need to over it. So yeah, that's the info bar, and then we've just got, you know, the header. That's typically where we put the main stamp of the brand. You know, people like to have some nice graphics up there and their logo and that sort of thing. Might usually have like an intranet name maybe in the top left, and we might design a logo for that. They might come up with some kind of fun name for their system, and then in the top right, maybe their company logo. Again, none of this is set in stone. This is just a fairly, I guess after doing it so many times, you sort of end up doing a lot of similar things that you just kind of learn do seem to work for a lot of people. We've then got announcements, obviously, you know, important messages targeted on sort of group and user levels. It only appears when you've got one published. News, which tends to be typically or often is the main focus of a lot of intranets, or at least on the homepage. There are a lot more people these days sort of going more social and getting into sort of our Innovate application and things, but it's quite a common feature. That's why it's in the default VI. So you've got news. What's new? It's just kind of like a list of the latest and most recently updated things on the intranet. So, you know, pages, documents, that sort of thing. And then home poll. Again, I'll sort of whiz over these fairly quickly because I'll send this over afterwards, and you've probably already covered this, I'm sure. Yeah, so that's kind of the default VI, and that's our base, and that's like what we build on top of. So I'll just jump down a bit further. So that's kind of what we've just covered. So yeah, there's a little bit in there about branding. So you can see here, this is sort of quite a good example of, varied branding that all follows. It's kind of very similar but very different at the same time. So we've got our info bar, which is exactly the same, and our search in every single one. One of them has changed the color of the info bar and the style a little bit, but we've kind of used their brand and kind of used the header to sort of deliver the main impact of whatever it is they want from the brand, whilst managing to maintain this info bar. You will occasionally come across people who absolutely don't like it and definitely don't want it or want it moved or something, and obviously you just have to try and kind of come to a compromise, but typically we find this works and most people are happy with this.
Yeah.
When it comes to the home page, it's generally just a configuration of what we call components. So these are like little bits of code that pull in aspects of the intranet onto the home page. And quite often people will sort of go through the design document. We have a design document that we send out. It's actually very similar to this, but it's less focused on the design part. And people might, see a design they like and pick a handful of components they like, and then it's kind of just a case of sort of messing around with the home page to make them all fit and make it balanced and make sure it's not overloaded and that sort of thing. So in this document there's a whole list of components. These aren't all of them either. These are just the most popular ones. So again, announcements, we've got homepage news, image sliders. This can be this has 2 different templates, and you can also obviously customize the CSS to make it look however you want.
Are you on GitHub, Andrew?
What's that?
Are you using GitHub?
No. Although Samir showed me it, but yeah.
There are some freebie component that we sort of posted on GitHub. So this is Andy just going to GitHub. So for example, the slider that you're looking at is actually that one, homepage slider.
So yeah, the thing with GitHub is it's kind of it's not quite there yet in terms of its potential. Like the idea eventually is, GitHub's obviously a public-facing sort of almost like a technical front end where you can kind of share code and all that kind of stuff. And for us, it's really great because we can centralize all our components, and then partners like yourselves can jump on and download them. At the moment, we don't have the resources to thoroughly maintain it, so you're often best off maybe just asking us which is the best branch or the best version to download. But in theory, eventually you'll be able to go on there and just download the latest tag, and then each component will have a set of instructions like this one here. And to be fair, they are, we're getting there. There's a lot of, really good components on there with stable release branches and some decent comprehensive instructions on how to install them. But yeah, it's just not like, don't be surprised if you download something and it doesn't quite work, because like I say, it's a resource thing at the moment. I guess eventually, it'll be there, but at the moment it's just a good start. It's quite a handy resource. It's got all our components on here. Well, actually, not all of them, but most of them, and again, most of the important ones. And it's just Oh, we lost. Can you still see my screen, guys? Or is that just?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's there if you need it. I'll send over that link afterwards as well. It's probably quite a good one just to have a look at as well and just see, how some of the components work. How they and that sort of thing.
So I'm able to download this and work on it myself as well, or
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you could sign up for a GitHub account. You could go into like this stock component, for example, and you can actually fork it and work on it yourself, or you could create your own branch and then log them. I I think you can do, yeah, that's right, a pull request. So you can work on your own features, and then we can have a look at them and merge them back in. And the code's all freely available. You can either, if you've got Git installed, you can just clone all the repositories straight into your web directory, or you can just download the zip file if you've got a non-version controlled instance set up. And here's where you've got your branches and your tags. Typically, develop branch is the most up to date, but the least stable. Master should be the most stable, up to date version. So every time we have what we consider to almost be a release, we'll merge it back into master. And then if it has a tag, that's like an actual proper release. Again, like I say, we're not quite there yet, so they don't all have tags. Let's have a look. If I go to time zone clocks, so you see we've got quite a few releases of time zone clocks because that's had quite a lot of work done on it. So 2.2 should be the latest stable release, and in fact it is in this case. You've got some pretty decent instructions here, and you can either clone it or download it straight to your computer, and you'll have all the code to play with.
Nice.
You can actually, the front end to Git is really cool because you can actually go in and just browse the files without having to even download them. So you could just jump into clock.js and start having a look at the code, just copy and paste bits out. It depends how you want to work with it, really. Like all these things, they're sort of, we use them quite often, but that doesn't mean you can't customize them. So yeah,
great.
GitHub. I'll send details of that over afterwards. But if you just Google GitHub Claromentis, will come up at the top. But I'll send you the link as well afterwards.
Cool.
So yeah, these are again going to our components. So we've got an application slider. This is actually another template of the home of this slider. You can actually change it so users can jump in the admin panel and upload and attach permissions to icons and things, which is quite cool. What's new again? So the latest and most recently updated things on the intranet. Mini calendar. Got day viewer calendar. So that's like it'll block out the actual real time amount for each event, and the viewport will actually move as the day moves on. So you're kind of at the top is now essentially. So that's quite a cool one.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's one that it was made. It was a custom component made for someone last year. I can't remember who, and that was John Hancock. It was made for them, but it's never really been used that much. But it's quite a cool little component. It's quite. In fact, that screenshot. Yeah, it's not a good screenshot actually because it doesn't actually have any events in there, so we should probably get another one. But yeah, that's quite cool. The weather component hooks into the Yahoo API. You can kind of hard code in the weather codes and put in whatever you like in there. Time zone clocks. That's using the high charts library. That actually works with PHP time zones as well. For a while, we were having to jump on systems every time the daylight savings happened, and that started to get a little bit much with all the clients. So we updated that to include PHP time zones. Pop-up weather, anniversaries. That just hooks into a date field in the people profile, so you can use that for people's start date or birthdays. Who's out? That works with our holiday planner application. So that just will pull in anyone who's booked the day off, or they're sick, or they're working remotely or whatever. RSS. So any RSS feeds you can pull into the homepage. That's fairly easy. A lot of people like to have kind of like, I don't know, BBC News or whatever, some kind of news site or feed on the homepage. Documents for review, that hooks into document metadata. So if you have to set that up in documents, but if you have that set up, you can pull those into the homepage. Stock, that's the Google Finance API. So you can just pass in the JavaScript, I think, like a company code and the properties you want to pull through. Home poll, so like instant user feedback. So that's all done in that's a core component. That one, that's in the admin panel. That's fairly straightforward. Employee of the month, that's a new-ish one. So people on the system can all vote for who they want to be employee of the month, and then it will just announce it automatically on the start of each month. So that's quite fun. Innovate, this is our corporate social networking. Internet's more and more these days going social. Social's such a big buzzword, and so many people are kind of embracing it. So this is quite a good one for that. Just people collaborating on the homepage. So that works. That's actually a really popular component. That actually probably almost is one of the most popular components these days, I'd say, along with news and fast access buttons and that sort of thing. And that's it. I mean, like I say, there's loads more components. Check out GitHub. If you see any in the designs that we'll send over that you're not sure what they are, just drop us a line. I can go through them. It's not a problem. But yeah, essentially what we tend to do with each new design and each new client is, work out what their requirements are, work out what components are going to suit them to deliver those requirements. So whether that's news or collaboration or whatever, and then kind of pick the right components and put them together on the homepage for them with a sort of custom style over the top.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the layout, you said you've already had a quick look at Bootstrap. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that's yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and just a 12 column thing, and that's basically it. That's how.
Yeah. Oh, it's a really good resource.
We just Bootstrap 2 for noting.
Yeah. So exactly, you need to make sure. They used to have a link to it, but they don't. So they've released Bootstrap 3 now, which is quite different. So we haven't been able to migrate just because it's fundamentally very different. So it'd be quite a big job. So when you're looking at the docs, if you go to 232, yeah, and essentially, as you've already seen, it works to, we use the fluid grid. So if you go to scaffolding and then fluid grid system, this is what we use here. And once you've kind of got to grips with it, it's actually really quick and easy to sort of generate layouts. I'll show you some of the examples in a minute, but again, typically we find there are two main layouts that people go for, which is it basically, I don't know if you've ever seen that, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's something like the F design or something. It's like a map of where people tend to look on the homepage, and it'll be up the left-hand side across the top, and then sort of just to the middle top across as well, and it creates like an F on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've seen the Z design, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's the F1 as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and I'll just quickly jump ahead a little bit. So you'll see a lot of the actually this will do. So yeah, what we often do is like a main column on the left and then a right-hand column. And quite often we'll have, so when you've got your nice header, and we often go for something maybe quite visually striking at the top here, it's very commonly the slider, just because people seem to love that component, but you absolutely don't have to use it every time. We do a lot just because it seems to work. People seem to like it, and if it works, then that's fine. And I'll show you. It'll be a bit more clear on some of the designs in a minute. But the column layouts we tend to go for, I think this is so we have a 7 and a 5, which is this is a span 8 and a span 4, and this is a span. Is that right? 7. No, that's not right. Anyway.
No, that's a 8. That's a 4. I think that's 7. That's 5.
But 1, 2.
So the top
okay,
yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, exactly. So those are the two sort of main layouts that seem to work quite well, which is essentially just like a main content area and then a right-hand column. But it depends. Those two, so the slightly thinner and the slightly wider right-hand column tends to depend on how much content people want to put in there. Sometimes people have like 12 what we call fast access buttons. I'm going to jump ahead quickly and show you what I'm talking about. So you see here, sometimes people have a lot of links that they want to put up. up here, and they might have a lot of components, and they might want to fit 2 components next to each other, and we find that that thinner column just isn't quite wide enough, so we tend to go, you know, for the slightly altered version. But essentially they are like a main content area and a right-hand column. And I'll jump into that in a minute, but just to very briefly clarify, you know, what we're doing here with the grid. Essentially, just check out Bootstrap 2. You've got all the markup here. It's really easy to create. Every time you want to do a row, you just create a row fluid, and within that you add spans that add up to 12. And as long as you stick to that, it should be fairly responsive, and you know, inherit all the Bootstrap styles and be fairly solid as well in terms of you know, browser compatibility and all that sort of thing. If you use, I don't know what text editor do you use out of interest?
Sublime Text.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I was going to say, have you seen the? Do you use the like package control?
No.
Like the package management, so you can install like plugins and stuff.
I've never used that. No.
Okay, I'll send you over some details on that, because like one of the really powerful things about Sublime is you can install a package manager, and then you have access to loads of free and absolutely amazingly awesome plugins that just make your life so much easier. There's one called Emmet, and I'll send you over the link to that as well. And it's like code completion.
No.
In fact, I'll show you. I'm going to show you now really quickly because it's really cool. So, can you see my screen at the moment?
Yep.
Okay, so let's just change this to HTML. So basically, if you wanted to do, say, a row fluid, you wanted 2 rows and you wanted 3 boxes in each one, you could just type in shorthand, so row fluid, so you just type in the class. We want 2 of them, so we do ×2. And then in each one of those, so we go greater than, we can do span 4, and we want 3 of those, and then you just tab, and it'll just create all the markup for you.
No way. That's
so
cool.
It's like for creating, you know, when you're working with Bootstrap, working with Claromentis, you're going to be doing this a lot. So something like Emmet is just amazing because it'll save you so much time.
I want this for info capture.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we have that. I mean, Sublime's so cool. There's a new browser as well called text editor called Atom, which is by Git, and they're basically by Git as in GitHub, so the company that do the website we just went over, and it's fairly similar. They're still working on it, but I think that's going to be pretty awesome as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, Mike.
It's probably worth mentioning that you don't need to download the Bootstrap separately, though, because it's already been in Claromentis distributed.
Yeah,
exactly. Okay. So rule of thumb, never ever, you know, make changes to the bootstrap.css or bootstrap.js, because that will get replaced when we upgrade. So it's always the rule of thumb is always just overriding it in your custom style.css, and there are some other things.
Sure.
I'll show you. I've got a technical document as well, which I will. That constitutes the majority of the homepage. So we've got, and it just explains about like what Mike was just saying, how we have like core files, but we never edit them. We only override them in the interface. So that is definitely, it's a good point. It's an important one to remember, because ultimately you'll end up with a really unmaintainable interface if you start editing the wrong files. So it's definitely good to know which ones are the right ones to edit. So I'll send this document over as well. This will be helpful for that. But yeah, I'll just jump back to the design. So we've got our Bootstrap grid. So if you stick to the grid, you can't go wrong, especially when you're doing mock-ups and stuff. If you kind of stick to the grid, and you're sending it to the client, when you build it, it's going to be exactly the same, rather than what I've done in the past, which is just kind of dropping in a rough big column and a right-hand column, and doesn't quite match up, and you will get clients who are like absolute sticklers for being pixel perfect. So it's always good just to kind of use that as a reference and a guide for designing and building.
Sure.
So yeah, you can. This is just briefly explains how you can nest the grid as well. So you could do a row fluid within one of those spans, and do another couple of spans to create like 2 columns within a wider column. So again, it's all in the Bootstrap documentation, but they're just all things that are worth bearing in mind when you're designing and building. And then at the end of the document, we've just got loads of example designs, and I think Rob's probably got a load as well at your end from some of your clients. But yeah, these have all been built, to the Claromentis specification, using Bootstrap, using the grid, and we always just, like I say, it's just that balance of delivering something that is really custom and meets all the requirements, but kind of makes your life easy, in that you're using the the standard kind of framework and all that sort of thing, because it's not just about it being easier at the time, but you're much less likely to encounter any problems. Like, all of this stuff has been sort of rigorously tested, and we know these layouts and structures are solid. When you start to deviate from them, you're more likely to introduce bugs, and obviously, if we can avoid that, that's the ideal situation.
Sure.
So yeah, there's loads of designs here, so I'll send that over. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, really. I'll send this document as well, and this just explains more of the technicalities of actually building the VI, how it works in terms of inheritance and overriding core files. But yeah, I mean, those would sort of be, that's just a kind of a very quick overview of the general process. So you've got, I think typically we'll have like a kickoff call, and we would more often than not sell like a 2-day design package, and that tends to be enough for like 1 day in Photoshop and then 1 day actually building it.
Sure.
Then if you just stick to the Bootstrap docs, and if you can, we have I don't know if, Rob, do you have the design? I don't know if I guess your processes might be slightly different, obviously. So, but do you have the design document that and do you send it out to clients by any chance?
Sure. No, I don't trust clients with those sort of documents.
Fair enough.
No, I do. I know you gave me, or you sent me in December, the documents that you follow, that process. But typically, most of our clients, or still half of them, for the kickoff meeting, the design meeting, I actually go and talk to them and sit down with them. So it's a similar process, but yeah.
Because I'll send you. I've just updated them yesterday, and like I say, obviously you guys are going to have your own processes, and that's cool. But I'll send it to you anyway, just in case you might find it handy. The document, there is a process one. We don't typically send that one out, but there's also one that's a bit like what we just went through, but without all the kind of design elements and the grid and that sort of thing. And it's simply, we just try and, we send it out before the kickoff call, just to get, the idea is just to get people sort of thinking about it in the right way. Because obviously Claromentis is a huge bit of software and they have no clue what it is, and they've never really seen it before other than the demos and that sort of thing. And with the design, we just try to get them to focus on, what they want on the homepage, what their requirements are, what they're going to use on the system, so we can kind of get that out of that kickoff call, take that away with us. But yeah, it may or may not be useful, but I'll send it over anyway, and you can kind of do what you like with it.
Yep.
Can we go something a bit more technical for Hendro?
Yeah.
Because then obviously he's going to start in and actually start doing the work.
Do you want me to, shall I go through, would it be helpful if I went through this technical document now?
Yeah.
It helps what the process that you're going through, because obviously we've done it from the sales or from the partner standpoint.
Yeah.
But it's just the mechanic. How do you maintain your code? How do you what do's and don'ts when doing custom VI.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I've got. I'll go through the document. I might have some. Alex, the one I did for you guys, Rob. Okay, yeah. So. Okay, yeah. So basically, the way it works is we have so the back end of the system's PHP, which I don't know if you'll be getting involved with, but the front end and the design side of things is HTML, CSS, JavaScript. At the very top level, we have interface default, and that's where all of the default VI template files are stored, and so the HTML, the CSS, and JavaScript. That's on the root level, so you can see this is like a typical Claromentis root directory. We've got just here, where is it? Interface default. So that's like the top level interface that we'll always be inheriting from, and we're just continually overriding the styles, but never actually changing anything inside that folder.
Yeah.
So the way we do that is we create custom interfaces. And actually, in the same way that the custom interfaces inherit from the top-level interface, you can also create child interfaces which inherit from your custom interface. So you might have, for example, someone who has 90% of their users that see this custom interface, but the other 10% have like a restricted view, and they might have less buttons on the home page, for example. So in that case, you can say to this new interface that inherit everything from here, this custom interface, apart from the index page, and we're just going to change the buttons, and that way you don't have to create a whole new interface every time you want to sort of create a separate experience. And that's kind of how that inheritance works. You can make that as simple or as complicated as you like. It can go quite well. It can go as far as you like. We've had some fairly complicated setups in the past, but essentially that's kind of it in a nutshell. So interface default, right at the top, don't edit that. Custom interfaces, that's going to be the majority of what you're working on. Child VIs for slightly more complex setups. When you're creating a new VI, there's a couple of files you need before it'll register on the system. So first we need to create a folder and give it a custom name. So if we jump back to here, for example, we've got, so if I get interface debut, that's a custom VI that I've created. And then within that folder is where we put our overriding files. So the first thing we would create is something called description.txt. That has to be in there before it will register on Claromentis. And that'll just be the name of the interface. So if I actually open this up. So here we've got description.txt. This is just called debut. So this will appear on the front end when you're selecting an interface. So that needs to be in there. That's one of the fundamental needed files. We then also have screenshot.gif. So that's a 150 by 150 GIF file that also needs to be in there, and that'll be like the thumbnail and preview that a user will see. So if I jump back here, you can see here's our screenshot.gif for interface debut. If I preview that, you can see it's just a tiny little screenshot. So these are all files that the templater looks for before it will register a VI on the system.
Sure.
And in fact, that's pretty much it. So as long as you've got a screenshot.gif and a description.txt within a folder, you'll then actually be able to select it from the back end of the system. So, have I got MAMP running? Yeah.
Do you use MAMP for your local instance?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yep.
Are you on a Mac or PC?
PC.
PC. Okay. Yes, I think there's. I assume it's WAMP, isn't it?
That's MAMP. That's all.
Yeah.
I can't remember what my out, have coffee, read a book. I've been working on lots of like little side projects, sort of learning about Angular and stuff, which I'm quite interested in. Just it's kind of a time where I can kind of actually just play around with stuff. So yeah, it's not too bad. Not too bad at all. There we go. So yeah, now if I jump to, and there's a lot of different ways of doing this, and you know, Claromentis is quite a big bit of software, so it'll probably take a little while to work your way around. But essentially, now I've created that interface, I can make it accessible, and the way I'd usually do that is, so if I'm going into the admin panel of Claromentis, going to extranets. So, I'm not sure how much you know yet about the system, but it's permission-based. Those permissions are kind of hierarchical. So you've got at the very top level is extranets, and then you've kind of got like groups and roles below that, and sort of individuals. So when you're setting an interface, if you want to make it kind of generic, viewable for everyone, one of the easy ways to do that is just to go into the extranets panel, click on the extranet, which typically a lot of people don't even use the extranets feature, so you might just have one called primary area. And if we just go into available visual interfaces, you can see here the screenshot.gif and description.txt. So now they're there, it's being registered on the system, and I can actually select it here. So I'm allowing this interface. You can even set it as a default if you like. It depends on the configuration. But as long as it's allowed, in fact, you might actually set it as the default as well. If you're setting up a new client system, you probably would, because they typically only have one VI. So create the VI, register it on the system, which is what we've done, set it to default, and submit. It won't actually update from there. What you'll then have to do, as a user who's logged in on the default VI, you'll have to change your own VI in My Settings now that this new one has become available. So you just go to My Settings, Interface Settings, and you select your VI here. And once you've got that selected, that'll be the one that we have. So you can see this is Interface Debut. I didn't actually set up an interface ready to go to demo to you, unfortunately, so it's not the best looking interface. It's kind of half finished. But you can see we've got the Debut logo getting pulled in, and the sort of styles and that sort of thing. So in very simple terms, that's kind of how you kind of create and register an interface on the system. Obviously, until you've actually done anything else, you're not going to notice much in the way of customizations, because you haven't overridden any files. So that's where overriding HTML comes in. I can actually show you. I'll do this now so you can see what I'm talking about. There are kind of a handful of files that you'll find yourself editing the most. HTML header, that's kind of like it's where you kind of include I don't know, like meta tags and custom styles and page titles and that sort of thing. Page top is the header and the info bar, so that's a very common one. And then index is probably the most customized one, because it's your home page. And then page bottom, which is your footer. So if I jump back to interface debut, so index.html is located in the main folder. You can see, so the way that works, if I go to interface default and show you what's inside here, this is everything. These are all the template files for the system. If you want to override one, the easiest way to do it is go and find it. So we know we want to override the index page. So here it is, interface default /main/index. Just take a copy of it and then go back to your custom VI. So if we go into interface debut and replicate the file structure. So same again, we're in main. I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. So this is, you would typically at this stage have an empty directory, paste it in. So we've now got an exact replica of interface default /main/index, but within our custom VI.
Yeah.
So if I now go to here, and if I refresh this page, so I'm not sure if I've actually got any news articles on there. Just have a quick test news article. And for some reason, by default, I think. Sorry, just don't worry about. Ignore this. Don't have to worry about this. Okay, because this is a local instance, I don't really have anything much in the way of content. But you can see all it's pulling through is news and what's new, and that's all we've got because that's the same as the default interface. If I then open up index.html. So this is the default markup inside index.html, and we can start putting our own kind of things in here if we want to. So, for example, I might, I don't know. So if I just whack some text
title, yeah.
If I just whack that in, and I was to refresh, you can see my text now appears here. But if I was to switch back to interface default, which I don't have, sorry, bear with me. So you see, we've managed to edit the home page without, affecting the default VI, and that's kind of it in a nutshell, in very simple terms.
The main branding is the page top, isn't it?
Yeah.
The index is just a middle area.
Cool. So, I'll show you page top as well. A lot of the markup in page top is info bar. There's a lot of work going into the info bar to make it kind of responsive and have all the kind of useful VI features. You can see if I
like that text feature. People often ask about that.
It's not easy to do because it basically you have to override every declared text size, font size within the system. So I just did a search for the CSS property, and I think there was several hundred of them. So I had to create this.
To override.
And the way this works is when you click one of those, so say you click the medium option, it will add text medium to the body, and then I've using sort of specificity. Overridden all of the font sizes, so you can see there's quite a few there. This is all just text medium.
Yeah.
And then I've got one for text large as well. I think like further down the line, we might start using things like SAS and less more, which will make things like this really easy. But until we do, you're stuck with this sort of thing, which is why when you sort of get to kind of grips with the system and how it works and Bootstrap and that sort of thing, you start to understand what is easy to change and what isn't. So that's why it's really hard for me, my face not to drop when someone says we definitely need a text size changing thing, because I know this is what's going to happen. But obviously, as far as the client's concerned, it's just a tiny little thing at the top of the page which makes the text bigger and smaller. So it's good to know, and you will obviously over time start to understand more about what is easy and what isn't easy to change. But there you go. Anyway, that's quite a good example of something that isn't that easy.
Yeah.
Well, it is easy. It was just a bit time consuming, so that's fine.
Sure.
So yeah, page top. Sorry, I'll jump back to page top. Most of this is your info bar. So all the way from up here, from nav bar, all the way down. Yeah, you can. Down to here. So down to line 120 on this VI. Actually, there's some custom markup in there, so this won't match up with default VI. But so you know, more than you can see in the preview pane here. That's kind of the majority of the file. And then at the very bottom, we've got head bar, which is just this. So that head bar section is just this blue section here. Head nav, that's top level navigation, which is all controlled through publish. So, you go there. So this section here, these are some custom styles again, but this is essentially head nav. It's all in page top still. And then just below that, we used to have a status bar, but now that's been replaced with growl notifications, which is actually quite nice for designing because the status bar was always kind of a bit in the way when it came to kind of getting a nice page balance. So we've removed that. We now have growl notifications. But yeah, so page top you'll be working on a lot. Index. Those are
CSS, Andy.
Yeah, so that's a bit further down in the document. Right. So yeah, that's your main HTML pages. Obviously, we've got CSS as well, though. And to do that, you have to override those HTML pages that reference the CSS and add your custom CSS in just below. So as an example, so HTML header. If I show you HTML header. So in here, you would have your, well actually, just to make things a little bit more complicated, all the core styles are included in a file called core head, but we never edit core head just because that's where all the things like jQuery, Bootstrap, all of our core libraries for the front end are stored in core head. So if you were to edit that file and then upgrade a client system, there's a very high chance that we might have upgraded a library or added or removed one that won't take effect. So what we do is we actually put in our customizations after core head. So here you can see, so typically you wouldn't have these two, that's to do with my style switcher. So this is where you'd include style.css. And style.css is global styles across the whole system. So anything you put in style.css will be pulled into every single page across the board. So, you know, for example, any styles you want to add to the header or info bar, you want to put in style CSS because that's going to be on every page, no matter where you go. You've always got your header, you've always got your footer, and you know, then your standard things like link colors, paragraph styles, you know, background images, that sort of thing. If you want to change the box shadow levels on the wrapper. One thing that's worth noting actually as well is when you're overriding CSS, try and find the exact selectors within the default CSS files that you want to override rather than just kind of creating new ones. So if we want to change these H1 styles, if we have a quick look in console, you can see that it's actually coming from home news H2. So we'll grab that selector, and this will actually go into a different CSS file, which I'll show you in just a second. But make sure you kind of match that up. And because your CSS is being placed below where the core CSS is, it has higher specificity. So you can absolutely exactly match those selectors, and you'll override it as long as your styles are below, which is how they are set up in this instance here.
Sure.
Does that all make sense so far?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. So
quite a lot to take in. I'll obviously send you these documents so you can kind of go through them. I'm sorry, did you have a question just then?
Oh, no. Well, So overriding them, so you wouldn't go into the home CSS and override them. You just override it with your custom style sheet.
Yes, no, you can override home as well. That's you obviously are on the ball because that is literally the next step. So that is the correct next question.
Okay, cool.
That's just here. So that's in a file called home style. So if I go home style.html, so the default home style looks like that. Interface default /main/home. Drop in your custom styles below. So interface custom name /main/home. And then, yeah, absolutely, you can start customizing home.css. And home.css, despite being called home.css, is actually included in news and also in publish. So that's a good one to note because that can be confusing until you kind of know that that's the case. And that's just a legacy thing. News and publish were one of like the first applications on the system. So going back like 10 or more, no, 12, 13 years ago, the structure was obviously very different. And that's just a sort of legacy thing there. So bear in mind, anything you put in home will be pulled into your home page, news, and publish.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah, and then absolutely you can start editing home.css. That's typically where you put all your styles though for your index page. So if you've dropped in all your components that they want news, they want innovate, some fast access buttons, some announcements, and then you want to customize it, drop it pretty much all in home.css.
Great.
And those are your two main style files that you would include. That will cater for pretty much everything. So style.css is global, home.css is just those three apps that I mentioned. Sometimes I would never really use kind of inline styles or kind of style tags within on the index page. There are occasions where it can be helpful. If you're creating your own custom component, I would probably create your own custom CSS file for it. And actually a handy thing to know is we have this thing called an @head declaration, which is like an HTML comment, but it'll put things in the header for you. So say, for example, I was creating a custom component here. It might be, I don't know anything. But it has some CSS. So you could do what looks like this. So you've got an HTML comment with an @ and then a head, then close it like that. And you can actually then you could drop in a reference here, and it wouldn't invalidate your document because it will be put by our templater into the head.
Oh wow!
So just interface maybe, and that will I won't do that because that'll break it because it'll pull the same CSS file in twice. But yeah, essentially, let's have a look at that. See what happens here. So. No, it hasn't worked.
You're on news, intranet/news, and you're changing how index.
Oh, right. Okay. Ah, yes. Makes sense.
Okay.
There we go. So you can see here it's pulled it up into the top section.
Oh, nice.
Oh, no, it hasn't. I've probably done that wrong. I'll
So is that just to save time, or?
It's just to create a valid document. Because if you just include a style reference in the body, you're going to invalidate the document, and sometimes that can, particularly in IE8, if the document's invalid, it will go into quirks mode, and it won't be good. It will look all messed up.
Yeah.
There we go. So you can see here, we've got this home.css, it's been dropped in just below the closing head tag.
Oh, nice. Yep.
So you can do that with JavaScript and styles and whatever you want, and it's just a valid, neat way of doing it.
Great.
I'll send that. I'll just send that we mentioned that over as well. That's quite a handy one. It only works directly in the actual HTML, so you couldn't do it in a published page or even in a published template. It won't work, unfortunately. But when you're doing your custom styles, it's quite handy to know. So I'll give you a good example, actually. If I just go back to GitHub, put it over here.
Just looking, guys, how are we doing in terms of time? You still okay? Carry on, or?
Yeah, we're okay. I guess you guys,
okay.
I don't know.
All right, no worries.
Yeah, so I'm probably giving you a bit too much at this stage, but like I keep saying, I'll send over the documents, but it's all just quite useful just to run through. Here's a good example here of one of our custom components. It has a load of
JavaScript.
Yeah, JavaScript libraries, and actually you need to include a reference to worldclock.php. So we just say drop this into the body wherever you want your component, and that'll just put all of that into the head section of your document. So yeah, that's it. At the
Great.
Okay.
That's pretty much it in terms of creating a standalone custom VI. Child VIs, again, they're very similar. Same thing. You give it a name, you create description.txt, and you create screenshot.gif. The only difference is this parent.txt file. So you could I could create interface debut custom, and then drop parent.txt in there. And what happens is, so if I jump back to this diagram at the top, I keep mentioning this thing called templater. It's our templating system. It's all dealt with PHP. But if you've got a VI set, templater comes along and it looks at whichever VI you've got set, and it says, okay, is there a template here for index for the home page? And if there is, great, use it. If there isn't, then jump up to the next VI, which is usually interface default, unless you put parent.txt in there. That's what it does. So it basically tells templater to then say, okay, there's no template here. I'm going to go to this VI's parent, which is whatever it is, and check there. And if there's a template there, then it will use it. And if there's not, then it'll go up to the top level, which is interface default. And that's it. It's a really simple little text file, and it just adds that level of inheritance for you.
Cool.
And again, it'll make more sense once you start actually playing around with it and stuff. That's pretty much it. So we've mentioned Bootstrap. We've talked about the components.
Yeah. So the component tags in the HTML, are those?
Yes.
The name references. Where do I get them? And yeah.
Exactly. So
how do those work?
You'll see a lot of funny element names. They're all to do with the templater, so they're not valid HTML, but they won't be rendered. So components are like a flag for the templater that comes along and says, oh, okay, there's a component here. Check parameters. So class is what the home page is. What the component's called, and then depending on the component, it might have its own set of parameters. So with the news, for example, we've got show tools, which is just a 1 or 0 thing. Show comments. So you can say how many comments you want to be displayed. Max number, that's how many news articles you want to be displayed. And that's like a really easy way, because this component has a whole set of like PHP files and HTML files behind it. But when the devs make the components, they kind of compile them all into this, what we call a component, and it allows us as front-end designers to just drop in the tag, and templater will see it, check what it is, find where it is, load in its parameters, and render it in the page. So this component here, this homepage news, is actually outputting, this story here. I've only got one on this system, but it's all the HTML, all of the kind of functionality. It's all dealt with by that component. You'll also see text tags, TXT, around the place. They're also to do with the templater. So templater will pick up on that, but it won't be rendered. So that wouldn't be rendered in the HTML. And again, it's just a templater thing. So if you ever see anything that doesn't look like HTML, it's probably to do with the templater.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the components on GitHub. They're not all like that. So we have some that are mainly just JavaScript. So you would actually be dropping in references to JavaScript and references to HTML and custom markup and styles, rather than just a tag like this, because there'll be no PHP behind them. So they're more like, again, our terminology is not great, but well, it's not. I'd say it's not great. It's not completely nailed down. Typically, a chunk of JavaScript code would be called a smart object, and a component means it's actually got PHP behind it, and the template kind of understands what it is.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. Mike's just had to pop out. He's got another call, but he mentioned that he also wanted me to talk about localization. Is that something that you've seen much about yet?
What, making the files local?
Yeah, so we have like a whole localization tool on Claromentis that allows you to essentially localize your code. So if you've seen that, again, it's fairly straightforward. It's how the templater works. If I just show you really quickly.
Yeah, Samir has been doing it for me, but it'd be good to know how to do that.
Again, it's probably something that you won't need to do that often unless a client specifically requests multiple languages, which does happen, but
less for us. Most of we don't have Europe on our doorstep.
Yeah, to be honest, we don't really do it that much either. It's rare that we do it. It's usually if we get a company that's international, and then they might want, I don't know, we did one with, whatever languages, wherever they might have their offices. But yeah, essentially you don't really need to worry about it unless you're localizing a system. So here's an example of localization. So you see we've got this select here. Within the select we've got our options. But you see here there's this text tag I was talking about.
Yeah.
So what that allows is, so that's a flag for templater. Template saying, okay, I need to do something with this. What are its parameters? And it has a name. And in that name we've got a localization key. And it serves as like a placeholder or a variable, so that when templater goes through it, it can see that if the user's language is set to something else, it will go and grab the language or the appropriate string and populate it within this text tag. And the only reason you might need to know about it is if you were to do localization yourself, you just might need to create your own keys. So say, for example, someone had a custom application and it was called, I don't know, so obviously that's not going to be localized, so you would just need to go in, give it a localization key, something like, I don't know.
This is for creating custom apps, and then if your clients require some kind of localizations, right? So it can be translated into different languages. Yeah.
And there's a whole wiki page on it for like naming conventions and stuff, but it's something along those lines. And you see here I put it on the H2. That would localize the whole thing. But if you use text tag, it allows you to just localize part of a string. Because you might have something else in there which is universal.
Sure.
Like, I don't know, it might have a flag with numbers on it or something. So that will localize just this part of the H2 and leave that bit untouched.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a whole wiki page on localization, and by the sounds that you probably don't need to dive into it too much at this stage, but it's just nice to know about.
Yeah. And then to change the localization, there's Samira knows how to do it. There's a panel. If customers, sometimes what happens is maybe we call it news, but the customer might want to call it breaking news.
Yeah.
The best practice to rename that. It's not on the VI, but you just kind of rename it on the localization file.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it from the VI side of things. That's hopefully a kind of very quick overview of kind of designing for a Claromentis VI and building one. And I'll of course send all those documents over so you can kind of have a browse through at your own pace, your own leisure. Sure. Yeah, I think that's it. Unless you have any questions.
So when you install a new instance of it's like new site, the ban, those documents like index and whatnot, they really come. They're not full on blank, eh? They already have some structure and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were starting from scratch, you'd be like, right, I'm going to build an interface. There it is. There's nothing in there at the moment at all. So we need to create those files that we talked about, like screenshot.gif and description.txt.
Yeah.
Just to get it to register. But then you've essentially got a completely blank, not even blank, just an empty directory. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to override the specific files. You'd have to go and find them and then drop them in. I often just use an old interface because all the ones that I edit all the time are already there. But starting from scratch, and just to kind of give you an understanding of it, say we want page top. Your two main folders are probably going to be common and main, common, /common and /main within interface default. If I go into common, I've got, these are all of the templates for the system. We've got page top here. We've also got page bottom. That's for the footer. That's quite a good one actually, because at the moment I think it says 2013, so you might want to just update that. We've also got HTML header. That's where we're going to drop our styles. So we'll grab all those and then drop them into our custom interface in the same folder. So we need a new one called common.
I don't think I've only ever tried doing this a few times, but I've always copied from an existing VI.
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely the easiest way to do it. The thing to be careful of is that you're not copying from a VI that's out of date. So obviously a lot of these core files change quite a lot, and they have actually changed a lot in the last few months. So at the moment, it's a good idea just to be a little bit careful. Things like HTML header, that was updated not, only a few weeks back, and that's got a load of extra stuff for responsive and Apple Touch and that sort of thing.
Icon, yeah.
And also core head's been restructured and that sort of thing. But yeah, so what you're doing is you're grabbing an exact copy of what the default template is, and then you're adding in your own stuff. So that's where you're going to put your style tags. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
Cool.
Great.
So yeah, part of it will be just kind of learning where those files are. Like you'll remember very quickly where the files are that you need to keep grabbing. And like Rob says, you almost certainly will end up just grabbing an old VI that you built, last week and just changing it. Yeah.
Sure.
More efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Makes
Cool.
sense.
Okay, good. Any more questions or?
No, it's cool if we email you or Andy, Mike, just if Andrew's got any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to email Andy or myself if you do have any questions. We're going to forward you the documents now so you can have a bedtime reading. And I'm just kind of hoping that this kind of session is useful for Andrew to avoid, hours trying to figure out things and,
No, definitely, I think.
Get some kind of direction.
No, it was definitely. Just because I was feeling a little bit, like I've studied all this, HTML, CSS, PHP, and then I came here and there's a few things that it's different systems. So it's definitely I feel a little bit lighter after that.
It's good to hear. And then if you do have any questions, obviously let us know, or we can arrange another session just doing a bit more in-depth on certain things. But certainly this is just for the introductions. And I'm also recording the sessions just in case you want to refer to certain things, so you can find out. I'll send you a link.
Nice. Sweet.
Cool.
That sounds good. Hey, thanks so much, guys. Mike and Andy.
All right.
No problem.
Hey, actually, Mike, just one thing, or Andy, would you be able to set up Henro with a account to update?
We need to get.
We can do that. I'll do that. It's fine. We can for the Australian clients, for Henro. If Henro's got the email, I think I have it. Let me just check. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
All
right. Thanks so much, guys.
Well, thanks, guys.
All right.
Great.
Okay.
Talk to you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Right, bye for now.